Make sure to follow my Twitch for live streams that I plan to do on weekends and probably somewhere in the weekdays. I don't really know. I don't got much time on the week, but make sure to follow the Twitch. Alright, so how's it going, everyone? Today we got some big news. Apparently the emulator for the Switch Yuzu has been taken down. Not only that, geez, my throat. I have a little bit of a sickness right now, so if my voice sounds really weird, it's because of that. Where was I? Oh yeah. The Citrus emulator is also being taken down, which that emulator is for 3DS stuff, all that kind of stuff. Now, emulators are normally used to preserve things. That's what they're made for, but they are able to be used to pirate stuff. And I think that's the biggest issue, right? Is that emulators get such a bad rap by many companies that it causes them to go after these emulators. I remember a recent instance with the Dolphin emulator, something that Nintendo's been trying to take down for the longest time, where they put Dolphin emulator on Steam. So now Steam was getting in trouble because they were harboring an emulator on there, which isn't good for Steam because now they're going to be seen as someone that condones emulation, when once again, emulators aren't made to pirate stuff. They're just something that you can basically have a loophole where you can pirate something. Therefore, that's why they are seen as negative by companies, but it's meant to preserve stuff, and preserving stuff is a far more important thing now, given how digital media is now, where you don't own anything, you just buy it, but you don't own it, right? The company still owns your product, but you pay to play it on their systems. That's what digital media is nowadays. Now, here's the problem with Yuzu, not so much Citra. Citra really didn't need to be taken down, but, you know, kill two birds with one stone when it comes to Nintendo. Yuzu has been having issues where you can play games before they come out, like the new Zelda game. That game you could play before, like I think a week before it even came out, because people helped distribute these copies, took them, made a file, basically put it in their computer, and then distribute it online as a ROM that you can download and play on the emulator. That is also the same with Mario Wonder. That came out really early. Basically, every Nintendo game that was new kept coming out like earlier than it was supposed to on these emulators, lowering the sales because now people can just play the game without having to pay for it, and they get it early. Therefore, you get leaks and stuff like that. And I think that's why Nintendo started cracking down on Yuzu so much. You got Dolphin emulator, and Dolphin emulator is mainly an emulator that plays older games that have been out for years. But then when it comes to the newer games like Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder and new Pokemon games, and that's where it's an issue, because you want as much sales as you can get. And the fact that that's the case, that now they're having people playing the game before it even comes out, leaking story details and all the sorts, it doesn't exactly make Nintendo want to just stand by. So they're going to go after this new emulator for their Switch specifically. And given that to be the case, now they're being taken down. Now, like I said, this is mainly, emulators are for preserving stuff and fully owning it, right? And playing it on the computer if you want. Maybe even to run it better, because a lot of people had issues with how Switch games are running at 30 FPS when the game is literally should be running at 60 given our new technology. And so computers help it run faster. Now, though that being the case, that still is a little iffy, because here's the thing. Nintendo also doesn't like the idea of you doing whatever you want with your Switch when it comes to preserving the product, because that means that now they can't just own your game, take it down whenever, so then you could have to buy it another time. Which is also another issue of Nintendo. Brings up another issue that I'll talk about later. But they pretty much are going through this whole legal issue. And legally, they're allowed to do this. Legally, they're allowed to take them down. However, morally, no. Because, once again, their whole business, right, their whole thing, not even business, because they don't even make money from doing this, is helping preserve their products and letting people do what they want with their systems and with the games they bought. And so morally, it's not a good thing, because Nintendo's trying to take that away from people who bought this game themselves and now should own it. And given that that's the case now, it shows that Nintendo doesn't really care about their customers and their people that pay for their games. But once again, they have a bunch of fanboys that will die for them, so they're safe. Realistically, like, Nintendo's had many issues being as a company. Now, like I said, this isn't exactly something though that like you can get completely mad at Nintendo for, because this emulator is dangerous for their company because this emulator is not protected or not properly used. I think that's the issue here. These people should have made more measures for this emulator to prevent like outside ROMs and outside sources from being able to be run on their emulator. They should have done something. They should have done a lot more monitoring on their emulator and try to control what is allowed to be put on there, right? Because though the intentions of the emulator are good, they are being exploited by other people everywhere. And though that shouldn't be the company's fault, or it shouldn't be the emulator's fault, it is not a good look for them. I think that's the problem with when you're an emulator, right? Is because like you have so many people that are able to put their own ROMs out on the internet that you can download that they can't that is harder to protect, especially since people will try to find loopholes and figure out a way to break any restrictions that an emulator may have, right? Like I said, Nintendo's been trying to stop emulation for a while now. I think even at one point they actually did basically ruin a guy's whole entire life for making emulators for old games that you can't even buy now from Nintendo because, well, it's their games and you're not allowed to pirate these games. But, you know, it's kind of Nintendo's fault because they don't provide you to play these games in a lot of ways. Like, these games are not available on their new systems or anywhere. So if they really want people to not pirate the games, maybe make them accessible. But this emulator doesn't have the excuse because these are newer games that are being pirated. And I think that's the issue. I think if you're making an emulator, don't make it for newer consoles and newer games because you are risking a lot. You were standing on like the thinnest line, right? That you can get in trouble by the company at any point. And it's completely understandable why, because a newer game is going to put you more on the radar for companies than emulators for older games. Like I said, Dolphin Emulator has been an emulator that Nintendo's been trying to get after, but they can't. There's like, for some reason they have a hard time getting after them, and they're probably not as big of a priority as something like a Nintendo Switch emulator that can emulate new games a week before they release. This whole situation does suck though for these people that made this emulator, because they're forced to take him down. But you know, based on reading anything from the site, when you look up the site and all that, it's pretty obvious that this is not like they're being forced to say some things that are blatantly untrue. Some of it's untrue and some of it is true, right? Not all of it's not. It doesn't mean that none of it's factual, but you could tell there's definitely lawyers behind this as well. Basically though, that's the situation. Nintendo has taken out the Yuzu emulator. I know there's another Switch emulator that they'll probably go after too. But I think this is showing that like emulation is kind of it's a medium that probably won't last forever and is bound to be taken out completely. I mean, it's bound to happen. And I think like emulators like this that provide stuff for newer games is just making it worse because they're becoming more on the radar. But that's basically it. Bye.